Welcome to this keynote fireside of the ET Future of Education Mini Virtual Summit. I'm Anita Karwal. This is part of the larger Future series, which includes the future of jobs and future of work. The series is our attempt to nurture conversations on the big changes transforming education systems, learning formats, and experiences to prepare for the sustainable future of jobs and future of work. The keynotes and panel discussions are an attempt to showcase how organizations and individuals are adapting to the new opportunities in learning and development and to the constantly evolving demands and definitions of work and the workplace. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome Anita Karwal, former Secretary, Department of School Education and Literacy, Ministry of Education, Government of India, to share her thoughts on Vision India at 2047, creating a future-proof education system that is equitable and immersive. Anita, welcome to Economic Times.
Thank you. Thank you, Melanie.
All right. Which are the skills, knowledge, and attitudes and values that you feel through its programs when it comes to education that India is actually prioritizing to build a society just so that this society is inclusive, it's equitable, and so that it empowers individuals to thrive in a digital world?
Thank you, Melanie, for the question. And I would like to take you back to 29 July 2020. That is the day when the path-breaking national education policy was released. And it is for the first time that we are in a position to look at the kind of questions that you are raising and ensure a future-ready child and learner and a future-proof education. So what the national education policy is actually focusing on is skilling. And there is a very interesting, let us say, not a definition, but a manner in which skilling is presented in NEP. Skilling is not just encompassing vocational education, but also several skills which are required for every learner to be imbibed at every stage, which relate to 21st century requirements. So there is a paragraph, which is my favorite paragraph in NEP, which is 4.23, in which 18 such skills have been laid down, beginning with language proficiency and foundational literacy numeracy. It goes on to lay down other skills which a child must have for the future, which includes digital literacy, citizenship values, scientific temper, mathematical thinking, environmental awareness, sensitivity, and contribution towards preservation of environment, etc., etc. So there are 18 such skills which have been laid down, which also includes, among others, knowledge of India and knowledge of the world. So as the Honorable Prime Minister says, Jad se leke jag tak, everything has to be connected, to be known, to be understood. And a human being has to become productive to be able to contribute to all this. So there is a huge focus on this. There have been a lot of interventions from the side of the Government of India, and which I'm sure we will talk as we go on. But I would like to, lay emphasis on one particular intervention, which is called Nipun Bharat. It all begins in the foundational years. Unless we build that foundation, it is not possible to give these skills. It is for the first time that there is a mission mode focus on achieving foundational literacy and numeracy, which is being considered as the basic skill for acquiring other skills. So aside from this, of course, you would find in the entire policy, there is a huge focus on social inclusion. There is a huge focus on digital literacy. There is a huge focus on, aside from civic responsibility, the words, for example, the word tolerance, many people feel that it's not there in the NEP. It's been used at least 20 times in the NEP. So tolerance, diversity, promoting civic responsibility, all these things are requirements for a sustainable, education system and for a sustainable world. And it all figures in the NEP.
All right. But then would you say, Anita, that, this has not been the focus of the current education policy? And then if so, why?
It has been there in some format or the other. But the kind of focus that is there now is different in the sense that there is actual action which follows the policy. So recently, I think somewhere in the month of October, if I'm not mistaken, it was 5th October last year when we launched the National Curriculum Framework, for example, for foundational literacy and numeracy, the foundational stage. Now, all the skills that we are talking about age appropriately have actually been incorporated in the NCF in the form of learning outcomes at various stages. Now, this is the first time that there is action which is actually taking place along with this. Yes, it has been mentioned earlier to some extent, but no, the action hasn't followed.
Right. So this time we are hoping that, the policy, provides the ideas and actually lays the structure for the future, so that we have an inclusive growth. But many have criticized the NEP, for what they say are gaps. So one is not recognizing caste as a historical inhibitor, for also not acknowledging some other structural inhibitors, that some other communities face, or the ways to address them. For instance, some have spoken on transgenders and the problems that they face in accessing education. And they say that, these are very deep-rooted problems and the NEP does not cover them. What does this then mean for the policy, which is to ensure that we don't leave any learner behind, as you said, and that each learner is given equal importance?
Okay, so I'm again quoting a para on you because having been involved very deeply with the actual drafting of the final NEP 2020, I'm able to quote paragraphs and lines and numbers. So there is a paragraph right in the beginning of chapter 3, I think it's either 3.1 or 3.2, which clearly states that there has to be a very concerted national effort for ensuring universal access of education to every child from preschool to grade 12. And this whole focus on universal access, universal opportunity, and universal high quality education figures in the entire NEPs at several places. So it is not as if NEP has not, it's a policy document, it has not gone into specifics. It is not as if NEP is not aware of the socioeconomic background of the country. In fact, the whole, earlier you would have seen that the policies have, for example, in the inclusion aspect, would have focused on disability. Whereas here is a policy which says that there are these socioeconomically disadvantaged groups which fall in various categories, which includes not only disadvantage due to caste or due to any other issue, but also due to gender. There are child beggars, there are children who are in juvenile court or behind bars for juvenile crime, etc. So it has covered a whole gamut of SEDGs, as we call them. It has not limited itself at all, and including transgenders. Transgenders have for the first time been mentioned in a policy. It has not been mentioned in the previous policies at all. It is for the first time that it has been mentioned that we need to take care of the education of transgenders, how to facilitate, how to ensure that they have equitable and equal opportunities. So it is mentioned in the NEP, yes.
So from your vantage, what are the challenges that you see, when the rubber hits the road, really when it comes to the implementation of the NEP?
Okay, so the first challenge that I see is the curriculum literacy, as I would like to call it. So what happens is we had earlier policies and we did have a national curriculum framework. The last national curriculum framework is of 2005, almost 17 years back, which had laid down the whole structure of what will happen inside the classroom, what kind of topics are to be taught, what kind of standards are to be expected, etc. But we could not follow it. And that is because, number one, importance was not given to it. Number two, curriculum literacy is something which we have not bothered to do. So I see that as a first roadblock. Unless the last teacher in the last school is curriculum literate, she is going to find it very difficult to implement it. Second challenge that I see is in teacher training. So as you're aware, there are two forms of training that a teacher undergoes. One is pre-service, and which is through all kinds of institutions which are either into diploma in elementary education or B.Ed, bachelors of education. And the other is in-service, which we normally do with the help of SCRTs and also the district institutions for education and training, DIETs. Now, all these institutions, whether they are the pre-service or the in-service, have weakened over time, particularly the pre-service institutions. In fact, we have several fly-by-night operators in the pre-service institutions. A lot of action is being taken against them. Many have been closed down. Thousands have been closed down in the last 2 to 3 years. But somehow it is not enough because the quality has gone down. Therefore, the quality of teacher which is coming out is not very good. So that is the second challenge, which of course is addressed by the NEP in the form of introduction of a 4-year integrated dual degree B.Ed program in all institutions by 2030. And Government of India has already taken a lead by advertising for it, and more than 100 institutions have actually are participating in the pilot, which is starting this year in 23. The in-service institutions have tried their best, but their capacities have become limited, mostly because of vacancies. There are vacancies across the board in SCRTs and DIETs, up to almost 50% in many of them. So that actually creates a huge issue. So that is a second challenge that I see. The third challenge that I see is that the schools in our system, the school ecosystem, the education ecosystem has not been used to the whole idea of innovative pedagogy. There is a very rote learning based approach. So the system is that you have a textbook and you have a syllabus. You come to the class, you write with the chalk on the board, and you finish the syllabus, and that's it. Whereas the NEP now is talking about a competency-based approach to learning, which means we are going to focus on skills and competencies, attitudes and knowledge, which the child has to acquire rather than completing the textbook. So it is the competency, for example, in say a lower grade of being able to read with comprehension, oral reading fluency of at least 50 words per minute in say grade 3. That is a competency. We are going to focus on that rather than completing the textbook chapters. So this is a mindset change which is required, and that we see it as a challenge. Of course, we'll be able to overcome these challenges in time with interventions, but it is a challenge. And lastly, what I see as a challenge is the content. The content has to keep up with the requirements of the future. And so far, we have not been able to keep up. So yes, the content is another challenge, as I was saying, that unless the content is variegated, unless the content is engaging with the kind of restless minds and curious minds that our young learners have, unless the content is able to cater to their curiosity and engage them, the content is going to be useless. So that is another challenge I see, but with all the challenges that I have mentioned, I am pretty sure that with the design of the NEP is such that it is, we will be overcoming all the challenges soon.
And we hope that is the case. This is now my last question to you. Given that India is such a diverse country and we have a diversity of learners with their socioeconomic backgrounds, with their own limitations, what are the sort of cooperations and partnerships that you think are needed between those who are in the education sector, and those who are employers and the larger communities, so as to respond to the needs of all learners, especially the marginalized, vulnerable communities, and also those with disabilities. I know in this budget, there's been tremendous focus on skilling. There is also within the ecosystem a focus on apprenticeships. What would you say is the roadmap?
Okay, that's a very, very interesting question, because that is something which should, again, like Nipun Bharat, be a huge focus, and that is collaboration. In NEP, collaboration is mentioned as a skill that every learner must acquire. Therefore, from competition with each other, we have to move towards group work, teamwork, collaboration, and creative collaboration. Now, I would like to first address the issue of disability and inclusion. Now, for the purpose of disability and inclusion, we need to really collaborate with social welfare policies, social welfare stakeholders out there. We were looking at the figures, and we realized that many children prefer to learn from home because of various kinds of disabilities that they have, particularly related to the brain development. But there are children who are visually impaired, hearing impaired, or have specific learning disabilities like dysgraphia, dyscalculia, etc. These are the children who like to come to school, and the NEP has made it very clear that these children have to be mainstreamed in schools. So we cannot say that they have to go to a separate school, etc. No, they have to be mainstreamed. That is one. And for this, a lot of collaboration will be required with our community, particularly for giving them access to devices, all kinds of accessories which will facilitate their learning, for content. A dysgraphia student or a dyslexia student requires a very different kind of digital content as compared to a person who does not have dyslexia or dysgraphia. And that is something which we have yet to move into. We have content for visually impaired and hearing impaired, but SLDs, no, we do not have. And we need to get there because there is a large percentage of children who are SLDs. So this is one collaboration which is urgently necessary. The second collaboration will have to be, which I would like to mention, is with regard to environment preservation and conservation. Looking at climate change, looking at the fact that it's hitting us very fast. Though we are not the people who may be completely responsible for this, there are other countries who are responsible for it much more than us. But then we cannot shirk away our responsibility. And therefore, it is important that we have to integrate the idea of environmental conservation, preservation, sensitization into our curriculum. We have to promote sustainable practices. Our schools the infrastructure has to be sustainable. It has to be environment friendly, eco-friendly. And in this context, the PM Shri schools come in. You may have heard of them. The PM Shri schools are going to be green schools, and they are going to be exemplar for the other institutions. And even training and resources which are to be provided to teachers, we need collaboration with the community, we need the collaboration with the industry on this. And also for skilling, which you have already mentioned, one need not enlarge upon it. Skilling is an area where collaboration is really required. The local industry has to have partnerships with our schools for this purpose.
When I hear you speak, I see the breadth of the ambition of the NEP. One reads the document, but one does not get a full sense of it. Would you say in some ways the stumbling blocks could be possibly the fact that it's an extremely ambitious policy?
Look, any policy is never implemented overnight, and no policy is meant as a 5-year plan. The NEP, in fact, is the first policy which has actually laid down that this policy will exist till 2040. That is why I've called it a futuristic policy. It will take us 20 years to get there. After 2030, the policy says we will start reaping the benefits of the implementation of the policy. By 2040, the implementation will be complete, and the learners coming out of our schools, I'm talking about schools because that is the sector I have specialized in. The learners coming out of our schools would be able to productively contribute to society and to the growth of the nation in a positive manner. So the policy is ambitious. It must be ambitious. Look at the challenges that we are facing today, and look at the dynamism of the environment. Everything is changing. Yesterday we didn't have ChatGPT. Today we have ChatGPT. We didn't have so many things yesterday. Today we have renewable energy. Today we are talking about, Tesla having electric cars, and, India, instead of petrol stations, we are going to have electric charging stations. A lot of things are happening. It's happening too fast. So the policy has to be ambitious. Had it not been ambitious, it would not have been futuristic. I think that's my take on it.
All right. Anita Karwal, thank you so very much, for sharing your thoughts, and for all the service that you have given to the nation. Thank you very much for your time today with us.
Thank you so much, Meloni. It was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure for us to have you here with us.
Thanks.
Hello and welcome to the Future of Education Mini Virtual Summit. In 2021, the Union Minister for Education said that 15 crore children are out of school in India. The gross enrollment rate in higher education is only about 27%. 50% graduates are not employable, and 81% of the workforce is in the informal sector. These are big and deep challenges, beginning right from school education and continuing with issues of employability. So how will we bring these 15 crore children into the school system? What will be the flexibility of various on-ramps and off-ramps in learning so that more students can be channeled into higher education? We have the new education policy, but what's the time frame in which the NEP can sort out some of these big challenges? Now, I hope that my panel today can bring some clarity to a few of these issues and help us grasp some of the nuances. I'm very happy to welcome Jasmine Gohil. She's the Professor and Associate Dean, Academic Affairs at Anant National University. She has over 2 decades of experience in education and architectural practice, with over 10 years as an academic at several architecture institutes. Jasmine, wonderful to have you. Welcome to Economic Times.
Thank you, Meloni, for inviting me.
Next, we have founders and CEOs of 2 edtech companies. First up, Sarvesh Agrawal. He is the founder and CEO of Internshala. He is a civil engineer who worked in banking and insurance industries before setting up Internshala, which is an internship and online training platform. Sarvesh, welcome.
Thank you so much, Meloni. Very excited to be part of this conversation.
We are excited to have you. And finally, we have with us Sumeet Mehta. He's the co-founder and CEO Lead. He's a management executive turned educator. And before co-founding Lead, Sumeet was the Chief Executive Officer at Zeal, had a long stint with PNG. Lead is an attempt at transforming learning in the affordable private school segment. It's very good to have you here with us, Sumeet.
Thanks, Meloni. Excited to be here.
All right, great. Let's just dive into the discussion. The NEP was announced in 2020, and it drives a big shift in the Indian school and higher education system. And this is among the largest in the world. But if we just take a look at school education, India has over 1.5 million schools, 8.5 million teachers, 250 million children. So, if we can begin with Sarvesh, and then, the rest of you could input into this, what's been the momentum with NEP and, give us a sense of the broad implementation across states.
Right, sure. Meloni, first of all, I think when I first came across NEP, it felt like a breath of fresh air. I don't think I have come across any education policy, especially in a country like India, with the context of the various social economic divides that we have, which is as futuristic as the one NEP envisages. For several years, so Internshala is in the higher ed space, like college segment space, and you spoke about how 50% of our graduates are deemed unemployable. In fact, the number is some certain NASCOM reports is as high as 75 or 80%, right? And so for several years, we have been hearing about how our education is outdated. There's a gap between what we teach in colleges and what is really needed in corporate. And now when I look at NEP 2020, if I look at this policy itself, and I'll talk about some specific implementations that I have come across, which are very exciting for me. For the first time, I'm hearing about an education policy which intersects computer science with social science, which says use artificial intelligence, but merged with humanity, right? And it focuses so much on the experiential learning and focus on the core skills that we all need as humans in the ever-changing world, which are, in my opinion, are 4 skills: critical thinking, creativity, communication, and collaboration. These are the 4 fundamental skills that all of us need to have right from our school days that would really help us navigate the world that we are entering into now. And I think NEP addresses all of these very beautifully as a framework. And as somebody who's always dealt with college students who are struggling to find their career, both as a loss because of lack of information or lack of opportunities, I think it feels like a massive step in the right direction. And let me just, and I think not every conversation that I've been part of about NEP, there's a visible sense of excitement across all the stakeholders. There's nobody who's sort of saying that, oh wow, this feels like a massive change that we are not ready for. Everybody sort of feels excited about. And I think that's the biggest win in my mind, because so many government programs can come and go, and but for the first time I'm seeing everybody in the ecosystem being very, very excited about it. If I talk about higher education, some of the specific initiatives that we have I come across, which I find very exciting, and already seems like NEP is being implemented. We all heard of National Digital University, which is being called the UPI moment in education for India. And I think what a beautiful initiative, and what it would do to the millions of students in rural areas and tier 2, tier 3 cities who may not have access to quality education in their own hometown. And in a very immersive way it would do, and in a very design your own curriculum, design your own career way it would do. I think that's beautiful initiative. That's one example that I can cite of its implementation. The second example I come across is UGC, because UGC, again, in India, the higher education system has been primarily driven by AICT, which is focuses on technical or professional education, which is engineering or MBAs and pharmacy and law, etc. But there's a massive number of students. Most of our students actually are enrolled into the system which is governed by UGC, which is your regular BA, BCom, BSc programs. And for the first time, UGC is saying experiential learning is essential. They are making internships part of the curriculum across the board. And I think that's where the 85% of our higher education enrollment is. And if they start implementing experiential learning in their curriculum, start integrating internships into their curriculum, I think it will do massive wonders to the career prospects of these 85% of our students enrolled in the higher education in colleges. And there's similar focus on research. Now graduates can directly apply for a doctorate if they are good at research right after their graduation. They don't have to go through this entire master's and PhD sort of journey. So I think that's a very welcome change. And one small example that I want to cite in terms of a beautiful feature I like about NEP is multiple entry points and multiple exit points. And a beautiful example of that is a BSc program in data science that has been launched by my alma mater, IIT Madras, where if you do 1 year in data science, because data science is the future, right? And you do 1 year, you get a diploma, you do 2 years, you do a certification, 3 years. So it's up to you of the 4-year program, how much year you want to complete. And at every stage you exit, there's a recognized credential that is given to you, which can be used to build your career in that direction. I have never seen that kind of flexibility and that kind of modularization of education so far anywhere in the world. So I think all these examples that I cited are the examples that I have come across about NEP being implemented on ground. On schools, obviously, a lot of things are happening that I'm sure our other panelists may have more to add about, especially Sumeet, given that he is in the school segment particularly. But in higher education space, I think we're very excited.
All right. Sumeet, do you want to take that on?
Sure. I mean, I think I share Sarvesh's excitement in what NEP is bringing about. See, for schools, enrollment had never been an issue. We've solved the enrollment problem, at least in the primary or elementary stage. We are close to 100% enrollment. It's always, for the last decade, the challenge has been the quality. It's not been accessibility. And on quality, I think a couple of initiatives or a couple of directions that the NEP has laid out, which is very exciting, is one, the change in teacher education, because ultimately we all know that the quality of education the school provides is limited by the quality of teachers it has. And the pre-service training, which is the B.Ed program in India, is fossilized. I mean, it's not changed over the last few decades, right? And NEP is basically talking about how do we prepare our teachers to not continue with lecture-based, rote-based learning, but move to more activity-oriented, project-based learning, which is building the 4 skills that Sarvesh spoke about in students at the elementary level. So that's one. And second, on the pedagogy front, how we move away from the single-dimensional textbook-based, lecture-based rote learning to really multimodal learning, which engages the head, heart, and hand of a student. I think these are 2 big directions. If you ask me to be honest, NCF 2005 also spoke about these 2 things. But what I find different about NEP is that it is at a 1 level deeper detail. So there is hope that beyond the vision, there is also execution legs that they are indicating, which gives me hope that we'll finally see it in action in schools and it will not be left in a document.
All right. And this execution is what we want to take on next. So Jasmine, you could come in here. The NEP has 5 main features: quality, affordability, equity of access, and accountability. But, in a stratified society such as ours, what are the big challenges that you think could be that they are all met?
Yeah, Miloni. So when we look at the policy, and as rest of us have already discussed, we are also excited about the new education policy coming into be and implementation. I come from a background, I'm an architect, and I have learned always, and I have always moved across the sector, because in order to design something, I need to understand the user group, the need, the material world, the techniques, and everything. So it is a very welcome change, because when we teach, we had to in that rigid format given, we had to make things happen, and now we are, officially validated. So it's a very welcome change. And of course, as you are mentioning, that there are four important pillars, and the most important pillar is the accountability. You need to be accountable. How do you evaluate? Because when you it should not just remain merely a document where we are again, trying to comply everything, because India is vast, and the various education system and various way of thinking. So it is very important that it is implemented with its core philosophy, and not just maybe a compliance. And I also think that it's very important to understand the stakeholders when it comes to the national education policy, because there is government at one side, there are students at another side, there are parents, there are citizens, administrators, bureaucrats. All of them collectively should gear up in making this policy implemented. Education nowadays is, we also understand, we do not name it, but it is a profit making business. So how do we also bring a shift from that mentality to gearing up and making it possible for developing a youth which is able to think critically and be empowered knowledge and diversified skills. So according to me, I think we are all excited, but then how do we implement it is always going to be questionable, and it cannot be solved in one moment, but it will take some time, and again we need to go back, review, understand, and refine, and then again relaunch or do some updation.
Yeah, for me, when I think about it, the real challenge is it's so wide and it's so deep that, when rubber hits the road, you know, how will that work then? I think that to me is one of the big critical questions. And of course, in a society like ours, which is not homogeneous, right? In that society, how do you make sure that every learner is treated equally? And there is equal access. I think for me that is one of the big challenges. Sumeet, if you could come in. So she's laid out the broad and the wider challenges that we might face. Learning, which she says has become so commercialized, ensuring that everyone is included in the learning formats, make sure that teachers are sort of trained properly, a point that you made. But how do we, ensure that learners from marginalized and disadvantaged communities are able to get their fair share in the NEP? Because the challenges that they face are very different, and especially when it comes to learning with dignity.
Miloni, if you're okay, I think before I respond to the marginalized communities question, I just want to respond to what Jasmine said about commercialization, because I think it's an important point. And I want to just be sure that we don't stigmatize private education, because the reality is, in a large country like India, government doesn't have the capacity to meet the needs of the 270 million students who go to school. I mean, the reality today is half of our students are going to private schools. And ultimately, my belief is, and I've always been saying that in education, if there is no Saraswati, Lakshmi won't happen, right? The path to profit goes through purpose. So it is not two things. Profit and purpose are not two different things. Anybody who is doing even private education, if they are there for the long run, they know that without learning outcomes, they're not going to be able to build a sustainable business. I think we need to focus on the A of accountability, which Jasmine said, because if there is accountability, every private player will be forced to uh, kind of shape up and deliver on what they are supposed to deliver. I think what we are saying is we don't want fly by night operators. But we do want private operators, because without private operators and their capacity, we will not be able to meet the challenge of India. I just want to make that point. I know Jasmine wasn't saying this, but I think it's important that we say it out loud. Now, on the marginalized community, I think NEP has some really good intentions. I mean, if you look at, they've spoken about inclusive education, they've spoken about multilingualism, they've spoken about how do we create equity and access through the National Mission on Foundational Literacy and Numeracy. I think this one, the National Mission on Foundational Literacy and Numeracy, if we deliver on it, it's going to be groundbreaking. Because if you look at the ASER report, where 50% of grade 5 students are not able to read even a grade 2 text, and 50% of grade 5 students are not able to do a grade 3 math problem. So, and these are such low standards, and we are not able to meet even those low standards. So what do we talk about PISA and the OECD countries, right? Now, if you are able to achieve the foundational literacy and numeracy by grade 3, I think that will be a big leg up for the 270 million students who go to school today. And then on the vocational education and teacher training, these are tough ones, if you ask me, because if you look at in India, after elementary school, which is grade 8, you see a drop off in school enrollments. That's where, teenage girls hit puberty, and, families hold them back because toilets are not functioning. And then the male kids start to become of an earning age, and families pull them back because they need them to contribute to the family income. But if there are vocational streams which open up, and what Sarvesh said about ramp on and ramp off, not only in higher education but also after elementary schools, I think that's a big one. It's yet to see light of the day, but that's a really good direction. And on teacher training, I already said, I think our pre-service B.Ed program really requires a massive overhaul to first upgrade our teachers to be ready for the present, so that they can prepare the students for the future.
Right. All good points. Sarvesh, any inputs on this?
I just want to say that I have had a ringside view of the marginalized and low income communities' access to education, because my wife was a Teach for India fellow for 2 years, from 2015 to 17, where she taught in the government school in Delhi, exactly the same community. And I think I've seen her closely facing the real challenge. I think there are two aspects that really need to be worked upon if you really want to solve for these 135 million kids who go to public schools, while Sumeet is right in saying that 50% go to private school. One is, unless their parents have economic security, right? Why do most of these drop off is because suddenly pandemic hit and they have to go back to village, or the source of income is not stable. So unless you have a fixed income or economic security which bounds you to place, then you will keep going in and out of the school on and off, right? I think if you really want to ensure quality, equity, and inclusivity for all these 270 million kids, somehow the economic growth and the all inclusive economic growth has to be in concurrence with NEP. Otherwise, it will always remain a gap between, because unless your stomachs are full, how would you go about thinking about sending your kids to school, etc. And you, as Sumit rightly pointed out, that you would want a 13-year-old boy to help you with the shop or the milk cart or the vegetable cart, etc. And second point, I think, is where I think is the quality of teachers, right? Mm-hmm. And I think historically in India, we had this Gurukul system where the gurus were really revered, right? And over time, the respect for the profession has come down. Best of us don't become teachers, right? Best of us become something else, but and anything else but teachers, right? So unless we create a society and system, and government has a role to play where incentives are aligned, where best of us become teachers, not just revamping the B.Ed education, but there should be an incentive that I'm the brightest student of my class. After IIT, instead of becoming an engineer in an MNC, I want to take up teaching either in a college or a school, and there's no incentive there, right? So how do best of us become teachers is important for all the objectives of NEP to be achieved. I think that's where I think the government can do a lot, where create programs, make education, make being a teacher the most respected profession, the way it was earlier. And I think a lot of us will join that mission, then automatically the quality of input improves, the quality of output will also improve.
No, well said. But the point is this: when you see and when you look at the NEP, and when they have the policy in place where they want to do the teacher training programs, where they want to have a system through which the training is imparted in such a way that we have those quality teachers as well. Because right now the question is also, when it comes to teacher quality, numbers of course are a big challenge, for a lot of schools in the hinterlands of India.
when you guys look at the NEP, do you see it? The intention, Sumit says, is there, right? But do you see it being able to address these challenges?
Uh, I think I can start and maybe others can then add to it. I mean, I want to be an optimist on this because I think this is a once in a generation chance for us to really, really transform our education system. And if we don't grab it this time, I don't know when the next attempt would be. Now, from that place of optimism, what are the 2 or 3 things that we need? First is that I think the delivery of the B.Ed program, if you look at it, is currently I don't know. It's one of the previous education secretaries used the word mafia. I wouldn't go that far, but if you look at the B.Ed colleges which exist in the country, there isn't honestly much quality control and regulation there. So my sense is that it is going to be easier for us to design a really good B.Ed program because that's easy. You can sit in a centralized place and design it. In the delivery of it is where the biggest challenge is going to be. And if we can do hybrid, which is really high quality centralized delivery combined with distributed in-person contact programs, my sense is that seems to be the solution. Because if we continue doing in the current way, where I know of B.Ed colleges which open in May, take admission, and then reopen in April to give the degree, and during the year nobody actually attends anything. So those teachers, when they walk into a classroom, you can imagine how much support they would need to do a good job to prepare our students. So first part is to just get this design and distribution correct, number one. Number two is going to be that while this will take care of the pre-service bit, there are, like you said, 1.2 million teachers who are currently in service. How do we upgrade? Because these teachers teaching students every year means one more generation, which has to be then put a band-aid later to upskilling and stuff. So in service training today, if you look at it, and you should do the trend analysis, most of the training budget gets spent in the last quarter of the academic year, because where schools are in a hurry to finish up their budgets, when the DO or BO will say, you have a budget, why haven't you used it? And then they're pushed into some training. So this, to my mind, is more a cultural shift that we need. I don't honestly have a good answer. I'm hoping somebody has a better answer. But in service training, we again need to do it on a mission mode. So that's the second thing. Third, I think, is the institutional capacity. And I'm talking only about government schools, because in private schools, the operator takes care of it, because he is running an enterprise where he would demand delivery from their teachers. In the government school system, I think the institutional capacity to be able to hold teachers accountable. We talk about the skill will matrix, and we know that teachers in government schools are highly skilled. I mean, they're highly paid, highly skilled, but in terms of in-class absenteeism, in terms of actually teaching, there is a gap. So and when the inspectors go to the school, they inspect the toilet, not the classroom. So that institutional capacity to be able to hold teachers accountable to good pedagogy and good outcomes needs to be built. I think if we do these three things, there is hope.
Right. Jasmine, would you like to input here? What are the challenges when it comes from the teacher side? The gaps Sumeet has pointed out for us. But, what is the role, and, what are the challenges that teachers actually play? And, how do you think that a layer of tech can help?
I think teachers, if you look at any system, may it be private or government, there are a lot of administrative tasks which are the teachers are loaded with it. So teaching becomes just one additional responsibility for them and not the core responsibility. There are certain nowadays the education also has become output based. So you are not able to experiment. You are just supposed to show and display the data, the charts, and whatever you have taught, how have you taught, and those kind of things. So the accountability format, the templates which are also designed, has to factor in that now if we are encouraging critical thinking, we should be ready for no output at all in the beginning. So I think teachers should be made available free for their job, which is the core job, and also they should be taught at a regular interval, and they should be held accountable for that training. And we need to also, include international experts, educationists, so that they can come forward and develop our system. If we just if we just rely on those who are technically doing this work in the government, sitting at some position and trying to develop, it's not going to happen. There has to be, as I also mentioned earlier, that all the stakeholders should come together and try to develop it as a mission. That is what I feel.
All right. I also wanted to bring in this change which has been introduced in the new education policy, the transition from the 10+2 education structure to the 5+3+3+4. So, who can expand on this change, and, what is the sort of impact do you see this having for education, and then, as it sort of moves and broadens into higher education?
Yeah, earlier I was talking about how after elementary, so we used to call it elementary school till 8th. Now with the 5+3+3, that's the exit level. The good thing is that now when you combine the high school into the 4 years of what is currently 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, it gives students options to go into the academic path of, competing for the IITs, JEEs, NEET, CET, or the BSc, BA kind of stuff that Sarvesh earlier spoke about, or go into a skilling direction where they actually build vocational schools after grade 8. So that optionality opens up after grade 8 versus earlier it was either after 10th students would go for a diploma, or after 12th when they would go for in professional course like an engineering. So I think that is one big shift. The other big shift is on the other end of the spectrum. The first 3 years of early childhood were outside the purview of education because they were under the women welfare and department, and they were not part of the education department. So combining the foundational years into 5 years from nursery, junior, senior, first, second does two things in my mind. One, it recognizes the importance of early childhood education so that we give it the emphasis it deserves, and second, it reduces the formalization of grade 1, 2, because grade 1, 2 is closer to early years and not close to 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Earlier, because they were bunched as primary, formal education started from grade 1. But now, hopefully, the formalization will start from grade 3, and the informal education, which is more activity oriented, which is more theme based, which is more integrated, multimodal, will continue for 5 years of foundational learning. That, I think, is going to be rock solid foundation building for our kids. So those are the two big changes I see on two ends of this spectrum of the change that is happening in
right.
schools.
Sarvesh, how will this create sort of on ramps and off ramps, especially now? Where do you see the internships? Where do you see apprenticeships? Where do you see if people drop out of school and then move into something else? How do you see that getting impacted with the system that NEP has in mind?
I think, as Sumeet rightly pointed out, that earlier the option to go into sort of vocational skill or diploma was available after class 10, as what we call it, class 10. Now this is available after class 8, and I think that's a very welcome change. And combining the earlier question on intent versus execution, I think Delhi, for example, has led the way. Because I'm in Gurugram and I keep hearing about Delhi's education policy, both in terms of holding government teachers accountable as well as building really good vocational programs for these dropouts right after class 8, where they're saying you don't necessarily need to do 9, 10th, 11th, 12th, and there are vocational centers being opened for them to learn whatever trades they need to learn. So I think allowing that access to those vocational skills early on is a very welcome change, and it sort of also addresses my earlier concern about parents wanting not to spend on formal education for especially from marginalized community, and say how quickly they can become economically productive, right? So I think if the exit can happen at after class 8 and they can get into a vocational training after that really adds value to everyone in the ecosystem. So I think that for me that's a big welcome change. And I'm also seeing other than that, in general, I'm seeing a lot of interest from, so there are a lot of again, in private schools as well as public schools, there are a lot of groups being formed who are now looking at school internships a lot more seriously than they were being looked at, say, five years ago. Just to give you data, On Internshala platform alone, which is majorly only for college students and graduates, last year we had 20,000 college students, school students who are in grade 9 to 12 coming on the platform and exploring internship, which means they now want to explore the real world, the real career options a lot sooner than what earlier we would have thought. Earlier, nobody would have thought that until you finish college, nobody would really want to go to work, right? But now we are seeing school students wanting to do that even from grade 9 and onward. So I think both on the government intervention in terms of providing vocational training to students right after class 8, as well as students their own motivation to get experiential learning early on. I think I'm seeing actual things happening on the ground these days, which are missing a few years ago.
All right. But, Sarvesh, speak about technical skills, right? Because there's so much of focus on that.
Sure.
From your vantage, what are the technical skills that students need, maybe grade 8 onwards, or, how NEP will change that so that they are more prepared, for the future of work and, this whole dream that we have of being a 5 trillion or a $10 trillion dollar economy?
Right. So I think obviously computer programming is a buzzword, and I see that being integrated into school curriculums nowadays. So CBSE itself has already started talking about teaching programming to school students even from grade 6 onward. So there's an introduction to computers happening as early as grade 3, where you can just go and simply learn how to operate maybe Paint or Word, all the digital literacy, if I can call it, and then gradually moving it to programming. Like you start writing simple programs, because irrespective of the career you choose later on, programming and computers are going to be a big part of it. And I think there's a rightfully there's a focus on that aspect. There's so much talk about data science, artificial intelligence, computer science, programming in NEP, and I think that's a right because if our kids are not prepared, exposed to that domain, the world is going to be very different for them when they come in after 12th, or they will just not recognize the world. They won't have the skills for that world. So I think that technical skills, which is primarily for me, is programming. And then there's adult incubation centers being set up across schools in India, which are encouraging a spirit of tinkering. So if you want to become manufacturing hub, not just software development or back office of the world, we also want to become the manufacturing hub of the world. Then we need hands-on engineers who can make stuff, right? Who can take a device and tear it apart and then put it all back together. So I think the adult incubation centers and these kind of initiatives which allow students, maker labs are being set up in universities. All these are the initiatives that actually prepare students for the core technical skills, the future of the work, which I feel is primarily or 100% being driven by technology. So I think they're getting more equipped and better equipped with technology than our generation was, for that matter, when we were in school.
And that's always great, right? If generationally we can improve and, make greater gains. But, Jasmine, could you build on what Sarvesh has spoken about and, what Sumeet also mentioned previously on the National Digital University and the role of technology, to make education more accessible and flexible, but also keeping, this lens that right now when it comes to being able to access digital technologies, there are vast swaths of India, especially girls, especially marginalized communities that do not have that digital access. So keeping all that in mind, how do you, what sort of a roadmap, do you see for the National Digital University in being able to make education more accessible and flexible? Jasmine.
I think if we look at the administrative and infrastructural challenges, they are huge. But then I think we are slowly getting there. And if there is a positive mindset that we will be able to do it, then it has to happen. There has to be a role for digital platforms. There are digital online mediums, online courses, which a child sitting at his or her home taking some online courses, and now because of the credit exchange and credit transfer policy, one can also build their curriculum as they want. Introduction of a lot of electives and courses which are of multifaceted and teaching courses which actually build the hands-on experiences and digital learning at the same time is going to really help. I think there has to be some systematic steps taken, but I really don't have a comprehensive answer to it. But I think if now this is the time that we have all recognized that there is a need and the need is actually correct and it is a ground reality, so then there is a path we can build upon it from here.
All right. Smith, we are already talking of the future of work. When we're talking of the future of jobs, there's been a big shift, right, at the workplace now with hybrid work, with remote work, come to office some days, don't come to office a few days. What sort of an impact do you see tech having on education beyond, the remote learning that we have seen receive a great uptick during COVID? And also, the uptick that we are seeing in people, attempting to upskill and attempting to gain an education, people taking up MBA programs along with their work. Sumeet.
I think tech in education is a really deep question. So I'm going to try to parse it out a bit. One is on the dimension of age. I think the solutions for students who are, I would say, younger than 14 years is different, and students who are above 14 years would be different. And the critical thing is what neuroscience tells us about how the brain develops, right? The ability to be self-directed, self-learn, metacognition starts to get developed from age 10, 11 onwards and gets firmed up, I think, after age 14, 15. Before that, there is a reason why you need a caring adult presence for students to really learn meaningfully. And that's why if you look at it, online learning, which is about remote learning in front of Zoom, works for adults because they can be self-directed, they are intentional, they know what they want. And for younger kids, it hasn't worked. I mean, COVID has taught us that much, right? So that's the one dimension. I think the second dimension is that what online really solves for is both access and affordability and convenience. So for a working adult, right, to take 2 years off, and the opportunity cost is massive, versus learning while you are earning is a very different proposition, and that's why online learning works for them. For a child who is spending 7 hours in a school, to come back and again do online learning is an overkill. It's like murdering their childhood. So we need to really ensure that we have thought about the framework of what is the role of technology in education really deeply. To my mind, above 14 years, direct to student online learning will solve for accessibility, will solve for affordability, will solve for convenience. Below 14 years, the role of technology is to empower the teacher. In what ways? Two ways that we've been using at LEAD, and I should give that example. One is that teachers traditionally had one tool, which is the textbook. They would pick up the textbook, go to the classroom, teach from it, and those who were great teachers would have a great lecture, and those who were not would not have. Technology can actually empower that teacher to be able to teach in a multimodal fashion, which is that if they have a digital plan which has embedded videos, various things, right? So you can actually convert the teaching into multimodal teaching by empowering the teacher, not going direct to the students. Similarly, when the assessment data is fed, you can make it multivariate. It throws up analysis which shows the teacher which student needs what input. That in an analog world is almost impossible because you have to do multiple formulae on Excel to achieve that. But AI can do it in a finger snap, and we do it in our schools. So I think that's how we empower teachers in terms of teaching well. And second, because teachers themselves are adults, they can do online learning through an LMS. So we just need to be thoughtful about using, because I sometimes feel that technology is seen as a sledgehammer. Everything is a nail. You just go at it saying direct to students everywhere. But some students it's okay for, and some students it's not. I think if we are thoughtful about it and use some frameworks based on what is right for the child, we will be okay.
All right. Sarvesh, I think you want to input into this?
Yeah, I think very aligned with what Sumeet said. I think from EdTech, when I hear the word EdTech, there's so much talk about tech. But the real focus should be on ed part of it. The ed will never go away from EdTech. If ed is broken, like what Sumeet said, if Saraswati is not there, Lakshmi will not come. Similarly, in any EdTech initiative, if education, the core of it is not strong, no technology can solve for it. Right? So that's number one. And Sumeet also beautifully bifurcated that before 14, the role of technology is to facilitate teachers to become better teachers. And I think now, when in a world where everything can be learned online for free, what is the role of teachers? And I think that's the role of teachers, that they become facilitators, because there's so much use of information online for a kid, be in a public school, private school, what information to consume, in what order to consume, what to do, build on that information, what activity to do around that information, is where the role of teachers will come, which is, and they can also upskill themselves in that direction. How from being a imparter of knowledge to facilitator of creation of new knowledge among students. Now that transformation in teachers can come through technology. And on the above 14, which is where we say adults can themselves be empowered with technology. I think when you really want to do something, the entire universe conspires to help you achieve that. And I think that's what is happening with the 4G, 5G revolution in India, and both on below 14 and above 14 space. But I see that one of the biggest feedback for remote learning is not immersive. I can't really see teachers. I can't really interact with all of that. But with 5G and AR, VR coming in, while we are still early in technology and still far-fetched dream, one day the online education will truly become a lot more immersive than what it is today, a lot more collaborative than what it is today. And I've seen examples. There's a platform called Realversity, where they get foreign students to do virtual tour of India. And then the way they have integrated Google Maps, people on the street. So let's say we are having this session, I'm telling you about Dharavi. And if you look here and zoom onto a Google Map, and you can see real life how Dharavi looks like in Google Map. And then there's a live feed coming from Dharavi, from a person on ground, and he's telling you, and you can interact with people from Dharavi. So I think that was not possible a few years ago, because the internet penetration was not that great and the bandwidths were not that great. But with 5G coming in, the education will become truly immersive. And some of these criticisms that we hear of remote learning will go away. So I think I'm very bullish on it. Will hopefully go away.
I just wanted to add something on what Sarvesh said. I think that there is a lot of information available, on Google. There are a lot of things available, but then one has to just curate those information and systematically provide it to the student who is learning, right? So the course should be crafted very carefully, where 10 to 15% weightage is given on the tech learning. They should be exposed. They should be using online platforms, but then the ed part should never be removed, and it has to be it should go hand in hand. So that is what I feel when it comes to curating the information. So the teacher has to have a right mindset, so as to what to tell the students that refer to this and not this, So this task has also become very difficult nowadays for the teachers.
All right, so there are more challenges, but a lot of those challenges could become opportunities as well. This is my last question now to all of you. What do you see as your role in the backdrop of tech, in the backdrop of the NEP and the big shift and transformation that we are hoping for in the education system? Which will impact higher education, which will have an impact on profitability, and which will impact India as a whole. How do you see your role, and how do you see the role for your organizations? Jasmine, you want to start?
So if I consider myself to be an educator in the design domain, right? So we used to, or we still have a module called unlearning. When my students come to the university, we have to unlearn a lot of stereotypes, concepts which are not relevant, or which are hindering their critical thinking and their creativity. So we have to run at least 1 month of rigorous module, and then put them slowly into the design education format. So for me, I'm really excited that understanding is now technically validated, and the education policy is really gearing towards that. And we are also being a part of a university system. We are also being called by the UGC and the bureaucrats to present what we have done. So there is systematic audit and what plans you have developed for doing this. So officially, I think if you have attitudes towards building it, there is nothing stopping you. So I am really positive about it. And as Sumeet also said, and Sarvesh also said, that I would like to be optimistic and maybe fail rather than be pessimist and
not try.
Right. So this
not try. Yeah. All right. No, good points. Sarvesh?
Yeah, I think for Internshala, NEP sounds like what we have been living for last 10 years already. So Internshala has two parts. One is the internship platform where you can actually go and work in hundreds of different profiles with thousands of companies for a short duration to get a real taste of what it is really like, right? And that's also 2 points. One is, as a student, I make more informed choice about what is the right career for me, right? And I can test drive different careers before I actually commit to one. And NEP anyway focuses so much on experiential learning and is usually making it part of their curriculum. So I think Internshala's role is even more prominent in that aspect, that all these millions of students who never had thought about internships or experiential learning because the curriculum never asked them to, when they start looking for opportunities on my platform, because Internshala is synonymous with internship, how do I create opportunities for them on my platform in their areas, or remote opportunities? I think that's one role that I see. The other part is Internshala also the skilling arm for Internshala trainings, where we identify the gaps that you have, even as a college student, and the internship skills that are needed in internship, and we skill you on those areas through online education, right? And again, it has to be very hands-on, very project-oriented. But with, as I said, with the advent of 5G and AR, VR, we are looking forward to how do we make it more immersive, so that this criticism about online education being not as as you can't feel it the way you can feel a classroom education. I think that goes away. So millions of these students would come on the platform looking for experiential learning, but would have skill gap. How do we bridge that skill gap through internship training is an opportunity and a challenge that we see for ourselves. And how do we provide them experiential, actual work experience, short duration work experience on the platform with thousands of these companies who use the platform, is what I see Internsha's role in sort of achieving the objectives of NEP, of experiential learning and holistic education, holistic development of a individual. So I think that's where I see Internshala contributing.
All right, and we wish you all the success. Sumeet, you have the last word.
I must tell you that when the NEP came out, we actually celebrated in Lead because we've been on this for the last 11 years, and we've been going to schools and telling them move to multimodal learning, invest in teacher training, adopt technology in schools. And schools used to ask us, we've been doing this for the last 20 years, why should we change? And then NEP came like a shot in the arm, which is that what they, in fact, word for word, what we sometimes used to go and talk to schools, we found it in NEP. And it wasn't confirmation bias that we found what we were looking for. Actually, it was a really good shot in our arm. So I think, to my mind, the role that we can play is twofold. One is NEP is currently a policy, right? People don't have a vision of what it would look like in a school. But if they go to a lead-powered school, they can actually see what NEP in execution would look like. Like, what does an engaged classroom look like? What does an empowered teacher look like? What do outcomes look like? So from the theory or the word to action, in fact, we have now close to 3,000 schools where we've implemented LEAD. Any of these schools, if you visit, you will see NEP in action. So that, I think, is one role we can definitely play if the government wants to show people what NEP in action can look like. But in the long term, our mission is very aligned to NEP, that if India has to become Atmanirbhar, we have to make our kids self-confident and ready for that future. 270 million kids, 130 million going to private schools. We currently serve 5 million. If we can serve those 130 million, I think we will really have a big contribution to make to the future of India and to NEP's mission. So that's what we are gearing up for.
All right, and I wish you, Sarvesh, and also Jasmine, the very best in being able to power what you do, so that, as you say, we can get all of those kids in an education system which benefits them, benefits society, benefits the country. And also, hopefully, all those kids who are out of school, the 15 crore that the minister was talking about, hopefully NEP can get all of them into school and propel them into a future, which is shining bright. But thank you so very much, Sumeet Mehta, Sarvesh Agrawal, and Jasmine Gohil, for joining us today and for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Thank you so much, Milani. It was wonderful.